Greetings, and thank you for joining the Capstone Group for this important Zoom event. Before we get to our main presentation, a bit about the Capstone Group. We were founded in August of 2018, inspired by the Howard University student protests that took place earlier that year. We are a dynamic collaborative of Howard University alumni, faculty, students, staff, and community that proactively address issues relevant to the Howard University community. We provide an empowering platform to exchange ideas and experiences to affect positive change. Now, sit back and enjoy the presentation, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'd like to ask every one of you to talk about your journey, and you have 3 minutes to do so, just for the interest of time, because we do want to get to the folks who are on this call, their questions. The first question is, what led you to your current country? Like, talk about your journey. What led you to your current country, and what role, if any, did Howard play in you being there? And we're going to start with Rod first, and then, yeah.
Okay. Well, it was love. It was love. I mean, whilst I was on tour with Gil Scott Heron, like in the late '80s, early '90s, I met my wife, and that was 1989 when I met her, and we became friends, and then that friendship blossomed into a romance, which led to 26 years of marriage, basically. So yeah, that's what brought me to the UK. We had a long distance relationship about 5 years. Then I eventually moved over. We got married. So that was it. But I mean, I was working I was working in the UK like every year for about 5 years, just doing tours, the UK and Europe. So yeah. And how was Howard instrumental in that? Well, it's just fate. It's just fate. I mean, fundamentally, it's music. Music led me to know you and Chuck and everyone else, and through music, that led me to Howard. So music has been the vessel for my relationships and for my personal development, and for my, it's both personally and professionally. So yeah.
So music has been your guiding force and where you have gone, and leading you to the love, and music leading you to the love. That sounds like a film, doesn't it? The UK.
Absolutely.
Okay, beautiful. We're gonna circle back. We're gonna go to Bridget. Bridget, how did you go to South Africa? I looked up and you were like in South Africa. How did you get there? What made you go to South Africa?
Well, after leaving Howard, I went on a trip to El Salvador. My call to be a missionary, which my mother swears I knew that I was going to do this when I was 4 years old. But I was a very spiritual child raised in a very traumatic, environment. But nice that my mom was able to share that information, because it gave me clarity about who I was and what I had discerned. So the South Africa, the El Salvadorian experience was truly backpacking. Got my nursing degree. I was young, wanted to, kind of explore the world, which was what Howard gave me, because I'm from Kansas City, Kansas. I think my nickname at Howard was Tumbleweed or something like that. uh, because, you know, it was different. Not Howard University and Washington, D.C. was like a big, wide, eye-opening experience for me. And I just wanted more. So when I got back, I started looking for opportunities. Like I said, I went to El Salvador um, after the Cold Wars there with, you know, the Jesuit priests and the massacres in Honduras. I worked in just volunteer backpacking with different ophthalmic medical teams, teaching the rural healthcare workers how to apply with limited resources ophthalmic techniques so that people could, you know, see, get glasses, deal with ophthalmic diseases. So when I came back from that experience, I went to my church's, had a global ministries department, and I went and applied. And I was for sure, given my experience in Central America, that was where they sent me. But they called me a week later and said, we're sending you to South Africa. And I'm like, okay. And there I was for, you know, 18 years based in Cape Town, South Africa, working with a very church-specific partner there, Cape Town City Mission, with street children. Wow. And that, that was another, you know, eye-opening experience, very rewarding, fascinating. I went in 97. Apartheid ended in 94. The first Democratic election was in 94. So I was there for the second one in 98. It was just, you know, there was just such an awareness in South Africa with the international people, the expats that were there as well as South Africans themselves, that South Africa was just the place to be, you know, during that time because of what the country was going through and Mandela's release and the end of apartheid. So I stayed there. I found love while I was pastoring. I was doing a rotation pastoring at an MCC church that was new to South Africa for LGBTQ folks. And during that time, I met Anthea, my wife, now in 22 years. So yeah, I worked with different organizations, finished my studies in public health as well as theology at the University of Cape Town and the University of South Africa, UNISA, and just went on and networked and found lots to keep me busy, worked with some really dynamic initiatives and programs, focused mostly on HIV/AIDS, and midwifery with prevention of mother-to-child transmission with HIV/AIDS. And yeah, so that's kind of my story. You know, Howard was just a big eye-opener coming, you know, from a relatively poor community in Kansas City, Kansas, not getting any guidance, you know, from, you know, my family, being a person to go to college, you know, it was just exciting. And life just got more and more exciting from there. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So Howard, it sounds like Howard was kind of the springboard for you to see more. And
Exactly.
you really took that on. So
I did.
And
Absolutely.
I want to talk with you further, like a little bit later, about like the culture shock and, you know, some of those kind of things and the cultural differences. Okay. We're going to go to Tisa. Tisa, tell us about your journey to Taipei, and how that has been. Did Howard play a role in that? What made you choose Taipei, Taiwan?
So every time someone asks me that, I always tell them I did not choose Taiwan. Taiwan chose me, because in January of this year, you could not tell me that I would be on the other side of the world right now. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity. But I initially moved back to the BVI with the intention of getting some type of scholarship from my government to continue my education. However, shortly after I moved back home, I got pregnant, and that kind of slowed things down for me. And then shortly after that, my son's father passed away. So I kind of went into survival mode for the both of us. And once I saw this opportunity, I knew it was something that I couldn't just let slip by, even though it meant sacrificing being away from my child for a little bit. It's gonna be for the best for both of us. So that's ultimately what led me here. How Howard played a part in that is, I feel like if you can make it at Howard, you can make it anywhere. Because I've been through it at that school. I went through the ring and fire. Also being the first person in my college in my family to go to college, and it really made me a strong woman. So if I can make it in DC at Howard, I'm pretty sure I can make it here in Taiwan, for sure. For sure.
So that was another hidden blessing with Howard
Yeah.
University. The built-in resilience that it gave you, the strength. Like, and that's really true. And I will say, yes, I was in the drum section under Rod and Chuck, and that has really given me so much discipline and strength. It's just amazing. Like, I feel like I can go up against anything. So thank you. And we good. Okay, Suna, tell us about your journey. You have a heck of a journey. Like, you started Howard in 78. And then you double back and came back many, many years later to get your degree. You were born in Sierra Leone. Now you have homes there. So tell us about your journey your life journey to travel and to live abroad.
Interesting enough, almost to kind of like what Tisa's saying, I didn't really choose travel. My father was a diplomat, so I started traveling when I was about the age of 4 or 5. And I've kind of sort of always had jobs internationally, with the exception of a stint where I did work at Howard. But I just have tended to work for international organizations. So I know now where I work, as some of you I've mentioned, I work for an international government, and what I do is diversity and inclusion. So what I do is I don't like to call them trainings, but what I do is I hopefully impart some of my knowledge and hopefully learn from others on how to create an inclusive environment, how to go to work and feel safe, how to go to work and be yourself. And as most of us know, because most of us have traveled, it's kind of difficult because there are some countries that just don't necessarily think the way we may think or align with the way we may align. And you kind of have to have the respect for those countries and their laws, but at the same time, we want to help to ensure that our employees feel safe when they come to our offices and our buildings and our work environment. So that's what I teach. I teach, how do you speak up? How do you, what are micro behaviors and how can you tackle them? I teach race relations. How does this work for me and Howard? I think Howard put me in this mindset. I can remember meeting people like Stokely Carmichael. I remember meeting people like Bishop Desmond Tutu. I met them all at Howard. I was at Howard actually with one of Desmond Tutu's children. So Howard has always taught me about fairness and people being allowed to be heard and people being accepted. The Hilltop magazine was huge. The Hilltop was hugely impactful for me because that's where the very radical ideas were written down and they were allowed. So for me, Howard taught me about diversity, inclusion, equity way before it was a thing, way before it was named so. And I truly believe that I can do my job today because of my experiences at Howard and how Howard forced me to see people for who they are, who they see themselves as, not what I think they should be look like or behave like. So there you have it.
Awesome. So now you live here, but you travel all around, but you have a home in Sierra Leone as well.
That is correct. So I live in the Washington metropolitan area. I live in Maryland, actually, but I spend maybe 70% of my time, 80% overseas. I do have a rather large remit as far as territory. I oversee all the embassies, high commissions, consulates in North America, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, and overseas territory. So it works out to about 63, maybe 63 countries, islands, territories. So I do travel quite a bit. The home that we have in Sierra Leone is our ancestral home. One, we have several, but the one in Freetown, my parents built when my dad was actually in the UK, working at the High Commission there. But they took many years to build this house. So both my parents are deceased, and they left the home to my sister and I, and we have a home. I was just there a month ago, maybe. So we do visit frequently. And it's my hope someday when I retire, to live there at least 50% of the time. But I'm very involved in Sierra Leone and all things Sierra Leone, very much active in the community.
That's awesome. We want to get into like some of the cultural differences. I'm curious about that. Like, as you're living in these completely foreign environments, how have you adjusted? How have you had to make adjustment to like the language, the food, the demeanor? A couple years ago, we had a Bison Abroad panel, and the people that were in Africa, I think Kenya and Senegal, they talked about how eating together communally is very important. And you don't just grab, like here in America, we say, let's grab lunch, grab. But there, no, you sit. They were also talking about how you have to greet the elders, and saying that's a big deal. So who wants to talk about that? Just some cultural differences and what are you learning with these cultural differences? Do they ameliorate your own life, or do they get in the way? Let's start with Bridget.
There are so many differences, like just general day-to-day, the things that were very, like, I guess, shocking, because when I went to South Africa, I was 27 years old. And so that's quite young, to travel somewhere by yourself and represent, an organization on a big level. Generally speaking, the things that I speak with people back home about are the diversity. I was in Cape Town and even in other big cities like Johannesburg and Durban. The acceptance and tolerance of different religions. Obviously, race was a whole different thing in South Africa, but in the religious thing is very difficult for me to deal with, like being back here in the US, because in South Africa, you can have a Baptist church within the radius of 2 blocks. You can have a Baptist church, a Catholic church, a Jewish synagogue. You can have a mosque, at prayer time at 6 o'clock, the mosque prayer, the prayers coming out the mosque. And I try to imagine what that would be like here. Like Christians would probably like throw stones and eggs at the mosque or something, because we are so not, we're just so not celebrant or embracive of other cultures and religions. When you're driving to work, you're going to the Muslim kids walking to school with the Christian kids and the Catholic kids. And, you know, when you get to the point that where they have to turn, they just say, bye, see you after school, bye, see you after school. You know, it's just like so incredible to see people, you know, that are just accepting. I mean, my wife, Andrea, you know, she grew up with Muslim friends. We have Muslim relatives, you know, and we have, you know, so diversity, you know, just celebrating it, accepting people is a main difference. Again, you know, racism, apartheid, that's a whole different story. But South Africa post-apartheid, yeah, just that tolerance. And I guess, you know, my heart is kind of stuck on this because of all of the division that we see in our country, you know, and just not being able to understand the whole, what is that thing called, QAnon, and all of this, you know, all of these, you know, radical, you know, thinking, you know, just makes it into the mainstream and gets, you know, embraced and celebrated. The other differences are, you know, they're like simple things like eating, definitely, you know, you just don't go in and, you know, grab food. You know, if there are people in a home, then, you know, you sit and eat together. That the head of the house is typically in it's the mother when it or the woman when it comes to, you know, that. And, you know, your plates are dished for you and they're brought to you, and that's done like in a certain order, you know. Guests, you know, then, you know, the kids, then the, you know, then the men. But also some things about when someone hands you something, like if someone was to give you some money to go to a shop, or you're giving a child money, you're always have an open hand. Whereas in the US, if someone wants to hand you something, you're like, you know, you're like kind of just reaching out and taking it. But this is like just a cultural norm. And I mean, I do that a lot here, and people look at me like, you know, but when you're in, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing like that? But when you live in a different culture, you know, there are some things that you just love about it and some things to speak to you, you know, and it makes sense that if you want to give me something, I should be welcoming it, you know, instead of like taking it. Also you know, the schools are quite different. All the public schools, kids are, you know, in uniforms at the public schools, and every school has like a different color. So truancy and things like that are not a big issue, because they'll like whip you up and get you back to school really quick. They know exactly where you need to be. Yeah, you know, the respect in the family environment, you know, obviously there's domestic issues, you know, especially in, you know, severely impoverished areas. Yeah, but generally speaking, life is just a lot different. I was based in South Africa, but I spent probably about 250 days a year traveling throughout the Africa region, working in different countries, you know. And sometimes I would just go live somewhere like in Kenya for, you know, 9 months, or in Zambia for a year and a half, you know, depending on what the project was. But my base was always then in South Africa. I mean, I'm welcome to questions. There's just so much, you know, so much that goes on when you're living in an international environment. The other thing that I want to say is that globally, internationally, people are a lot more aware of global events, politics. I mean, I had street children who, you know, were 8 years old, could speak 5 languages, hadn't been to school at all, but they could tell me who the prime ministers are around the world, the presidents are around the world. You know, they could tell me what was going on in my own country, you know, and the thing that I figured out is because it matters to them. You know, the effect that the US and other Western countries have on, you know, impoverished, you know, nations, it matters. You know, they have to know what's going on around the world because their life and survival depends on it, even street children. So
okay, I'm just gonna stop. This is so interesting. Oh my gosh. And we want to get to you talking about the retransitioning back into the United States with all of the beauty that you encountered and the diversity and, you know, all of that. But let's go, we're gonna have to go to Tisa with the same question. What are some of because you're in Taiwan right now, right?
Yeah.
And you've only been there for a month?
About 6 weeks now, yeah.
Okay, so what's going on? What can you tell us about some of the cultural differences that you're encountering and how that's impacting you?
Yeah, sure. So what I've realized is that the Taiwanese people are very, I would like to say, timid for a better lack of terms. At our orientation, they did say that they may come off as shy, so to not take offense to it. But I've also felt like I've dealt with a little bit of prejudice as well, especially from the older population. I don't know if they're just not used to seeing a lot of Black people, but I do get a lot of stares on a daily, especially from the kids. Sometimes they point. Some people want to touch my hair. They're very intrigued by my hair for some reason. And it does make me a little uncomfortable sometimes, but I'm learning how to just take it for what it is. The food is very interesting. Surprisingly, they eat a lot of pork over here, which I don't really eat. So I'm trying to work my way around that. Lots of noodles, lots of braised beef. Of course, this is the bubble tea capital of the world. So there's one on every corner. But I'm getting used to it. They eat out a lot. I realized a lot of the homes here do not have kitchens. I don't know why. I thankfully have a little kitchenette that I can do my thing in, but yeah, they don't have stoves and stuff. So you would see a lot of families eat out almost every day. How they afford it, I don't know. It's not that expensive, to be honest, but I'm pretty sure it adds up to be eating out at least 2 times a day if you're a family of 4. What else is interesting that I've learned in the 6 weeks since being here? At school, it's a little different because asking questions or too many questions is seen as disrespectful. So it's kind of difficult for me to learn if I can't really ask questions. So I tend to ask my classmates after class so I don't really disrespect my professors. But I found that to be very interesting. I don't know how they learn so much without being able to ask freely. What else? The temperature is humid. I thought I was from the Caribbean and it was hot. It is hot over here. I be sweating every day, I swear.
Wow.
It's super hot. I actually can't wait for the cold season to come on. And I'm like, when is that? And I actually hate being cold. So for me to want to be cold, it's hot. It's super hot. They did warn us that there are typhoons. So we call them hurricanes in the Caribbean, but over here they call them typhoons and they get them quite often. They also warned me that an earthquake might happen here or there and to not panic because they're used to it. I'm praying that I don't experience that while I'm over here, but I do have cracks in my walls in my apartments from previous earthquakes, so I can tell it's a thing for real. What else? There, besides the little bit of prejudice that I did face, they're very sweet people. A lot of them are intrigued, like I told you, from me, just me being me. So I go out and they ask to take pictures and they call me beautiful. And I think it's very sweet of them. But I do feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes from the older population. I would be honest and say that, yeah.
So when you go back to the British Virgin Islands, what's one thing that you would take with you? I know it's kind of early in your whole Taipei journey, but what do you think in terms of a cultural kind of influence that you would take back, that you appreciate? You don't know yet. It might be too early.
Yeah, I really don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm just still trying to learn the whole place, honestly, day by day, and take it all in.
Yeah.
And try to not get culture shocked while I'm here.
Yeah, I can see me. I would be messing up left and right, asking questions, I'd be nervous. Let's go to Suna. Suna,
Okay.
Tell us about some of the cultural differences that you've encountered. I mean, you're kind of a citizen of the world, so it might be a little easier for you. The thing about eating communally as opposed to, grabbing and running. What have you noticed? What have you noticed? What do you think is valuable?
I think generally, with the exception of maybe North America and Europe, even in Latin America, when I travel the Caribbean, when I travel Africa, eating communally is a huge thing. People will stop and have their 1 hour lunch, and they will all go out and sit down and eat lunch. So it's really a time when they connect. I find that we in the North America, I don't like to say the Western world anymore because I don't really know what that means, but North America and Europe, we tend to be rush. Particularly in the US, we tend to eat at our desks, or we don't have time. And I'm telling you, when I do trainings in some of these countries, and I'll say, okay, we can just run over 5 or 10 minutes, they look at me like I've grown a second head. Like you can't take this time from us. It's very important for them, and I think it's wonderful because I think it helps recalibrate and reset your day. I think as far as what has struck me the most, to be very honest with you, is the difference in the world, not just in the US, the world pre I guess George Floyd, before his murder and after his murder. It's not just a US thing. I'm telling you, the world changed. I travel quite a bit, and I have seen the way I was treated pre the murder of George Floyd and the way I'm treated now. For one thing, I noticed that there seems to be almost a latent kind of pushback. I don't want to say it's not an overt aggression, but you go to a restaurant, my Caucasian colleagues are now treated kind of like second-class citizens compared to me. Pre-George Floyd, that was not the case. So I'm seeing a shift in behavior, because I think that, thanks again, maybe to social media, but the way that the world saw this man being murdered in front of us, I think that was just like, enough is enough for the world. And while a lot of countries don't have the wherewithal to maybe scream out loud or protest out loud, but to Bridget's point, when America has a cold, the rest of the world gets pneumonia. So they do watch what's going on in the US, and the way that they address it might be different. So in some countries, the kids become hyper knowledgeable in what's going on in the world, so they can be in some sort of a psychological state of preparedness. Well, what I've seen since the murder of George Floyd is that things have changed. I think that the world is really looking more critically at equality, acceptance, or lack thereof. I find that I'm being treated a little bit more with respect than I was pre-George Floyd. And so in my mind now, a lot of things that I look at pre-George Floyd and post-George Floyd. And this is, again, in terms from my perspective as someone who deals with diversity and equity, I see that the world is very subtly doing more, in my opinion, to make it a little more equitable for people who may be considered minorities. I see it in the way we eat. I see it now at meetings. being invited to certain meetings, being offered opportunities to speak up, if not first, to be moderators. We're now being really given opportunities on stage and at the platform. So that's why I see the difference.
Okay, well, thank you. And I hope that maybe I'm not seeing the difference here in the US, because I mean, I see people getting their head bashed in, but I do know what you're saying, like in the corporate arena. I don't know, maybe it's just temporary, and maybe they'll go back to just a white supremacist, blatant white supremacy, probably so. But we're going to deal with that. Okay, so let's go to Rod, and then we have one more question before we open it up to guests. Rod, talk about, I mean, you've been over in the UK so long that you have their accent. Talk about your adjustment, the cultural differences. How has it been? How did you create a circle of friends there? Just describe some of your adjustment process.
Okay, yeah, I think the biggest adjustment is one of the major adjustments is the way you communicate. The way you communicate here is a lot different, and also you can't bring an American mindset to the game. You have to really assimilate. The saying, "When in Rome, do as the Romans." You really have to do that to get to know people and to gain their trust. And so it took about 2 years for me to even really get to find work over here, because people have to get over here in the UK. They have to get to know you first, like opposed to in the US, where I was just there. I was in Texas a couple of months ago, and I had to get an Uber to the gig every night. So I get this Uber, and every Uber driver would tell me their entire life story. Like in 20 minutes, I knew everything about them. The kids, the divorce, how their husband was beating them. Every nuance of their life in 20 or 30 minutes, I knew. Over here, that will not happen. In the UK, people, they say, there's a reserved they're just a lot more reserved over here. You have to, it takes a while to get to know people. They won't disclose every nuance of their personal life to you as soon as they meet you. And then the other thing. So you gotta get to a mindset, and then the way you communicate. Like in the United States, people tend to be very brash, very loud. And over here, that's considered to be, just unsociable. In a pub, yeah, that's fine. But just generally, just like out in public, just being loud and, just being brash, and like, that is looked upon as being
it's uncouth.
Yeah, uncouth. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's so you have to you have to adjust your whole mindset and the way you communicate with people. Certain words, it's just certain things could be like sort of the whole American way of communicating could be misconstrued as something else. You know what I mean? I could be joking, and they'll think I'm serious. And then their sense of humor is different. They use a lot of irony, in their sense of humor. So you have to get with the program, so to speak. And the other thing, in terms of like food, and like when I was in the States, I would eat I mean, I love Caribbean food, and it's a huge Caribbean, community here. You get the Trinidadians, Jamaicans. You got the whole gamut, right? So yeah, I mean, I used to eat, Caribbean food every day because I used to live near Howard. And, there was Riza's, there was Brown's, there was Negril, there was Montego Bay, there was Fish Wings and Tings.
You knew them all, brother.
I knew them all, So I'm eating Caribbean food every day, So when I moved here, I was like, I noticed a huge Caribbean community here. It's just like, it's massive. But I couldn't find any Jamaican. I was like, where the Jamaican restaurants? Where, London is so big. I mean, it's just like, 600 square miles. DC is 60 square miles, So just getting around, finding places that, and things are in pockets, there's over 250 languages spoken in London. The community, the city is that diverse, but still it takes a while to find out where your lane is, in that, so then so I couldn't find any Jamaican food, so but I eventually did. And then the other thing is that British food is quite different. You're not going to get your typical what do they eat in America? I've been away for so long, macaroni and cheese, collard greens,
Yams.
your fried fish, your blowout, you want crabs. I want some crabs or so and so, go down to the wharf, get some lobsters or whatever. You can't really do that, you're gonna have some quiche, you're gonna have this things of things.
You have to be open.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to be very open about that. I mean, it's I guess it's quite continental because you have your Turkish, you have your Greek, and then Asian food over here. I mean, now, my wife is half Pakistani and Dutch, so I never ate Asian food. Asian food meaning Indian. And that's the other thing, I used to think Asian as being Chinese, but here Asian is Indian or Pakistani, So yeah, it's just
okay.
like now, like my favorite food is Indian. Indian,
right on.
curries,
Right on.
Indian curry. That's what that's my favorite thing now.
We do want to open up the floor for people to ask questions. I'd like for two people to answer this question, two of you panelists, before we open it up. Why is it important for people to have these experiences of living abroad, traveling and living abroad? And what do people need to do before they go? And just if two people can answer that, two panelists, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. Why is it important for people, specifically African Americans, Black people, to have these experiences where you go and you live abroad or you travel for an extended amount of time, and you and what do you need before you do that?
If I can jump in there,
Yes.
yeah, I think that as a person of color, it's really important that we travel overseas because you will appreciate how valuable you are overseas. I think that we just are undervalued, unfortunately, here in the United States. I mean, when you travel abroad and you hear about this prime minister went to Howard, this former president went to Howard in this country, the secretary of so-and-so in this country went to Howard, and Howard is huge in the African and Caribbean world. It's not so much in other places, but I think that when you go and we see people who look like us and are achieving and are being respected for what we have accomplished, it makes you feel, number one, good about yourself. It makes you come back with a sense of revigor and determination to do that much more. I think traveling abroad and seeing what people who look like you have been able to accomplish and be recognized for their accomplishment, because here in the US, we do accomplish a lot, but how many of us are really recognized for our accomplishments? Well, we tend to be recognized for those accomplishments overseas. What do you need? I think you need to have an open mind. We in America, because, the truth of the matter is, this country is blessed. Everything is here. You really don't have to leave the US to get anything, whether it's financial, whether it's topographical, whether it's different cultures. You can pretty much live in the US bubble. And what happens when you live in this US bubble is that we in the US tend to be somewhat arrogant, or we assume that what we do is better than what everybody else in the world does. Some of the worst behaved travelers at airports always end up being Americans. I can't tell you how many times I've been embarrassed at the airport because of someone from the US. We tend to just assume that it should be our way or no way at all. So I think if you're going to travel abroad, have an open mind, and also don't forget your race, because it does matter. Because the truth of the matter is, maybe what might be accepted if someone who's white does it, it may not be accepted when you do it. So don't forget. I guess there's a Creole proverb that says, if you don't know where you're going, at least never forget where you're from. So don't forget your background. Don't forget where you are, who you are, and remember to check yourself, because the rules just don't apply, to us all. And we're working on it, but it doesn't apply to us all. But be prepared to be pleasantly surprised when you go abroad to see how respected you are for what you can accomplish.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for that encouragement. We want to open up the floor for questions. We could go on and on and on, but our end time is 12 p.m. So let's do that. And you could put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and hopefully we'll swing back to Bridget. And Saquon, if you can let us know if anyone has, there's a question from Erica. Erica.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you for all the panelists that are on today. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to be on. I've learned a lot. I had a question specifically for, I hope I'm saying your name right, Suna? Yes. I was really glad to see you on the panel today. My family is from Freetown. My dad's side of the family is from Freetown. I'll be traveling there next year. I was just there last year. Because my dad started a church in Freetown. I'm really wanting to learn Creole, and so I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to learn the languages of the places that you want to travel. Unfortunately, Creole is not on Duolingo. So I'm trying to do that. And also I'm wanting to also purchase property in Sierra Leone and build like a family area in Sierra Leone as well. So any advice on that?
Yeah, so in typical Sierra Leone fashion, I would probably, the first thing would say, well, who's your dad? What's your father's name? Because we in Africa identify with family. And there's probably a very high probability that I either know of your father or know of his family. Now, Creole is generally a language that is learned by ear. We do write it now, but it's generally learned by ear. So the more you're around people who speak Creole, the more you are apt to pick it up. because keep in mind, Creole is really a compilation of languages. So when Freetown, the capital, was purchased by the British, the whole purpose of Freetown was to, when the British Navy would go and capture slave ships, the US slave ships, rather than trying to figure out, oh, well, this person was captured from Nigeria, this person was captured from Ghana, this person was captured from Senegal, they just took them all back to Sierra Leone. So, and then we also had former slaves from the UK going back to Sierra Leone. So you have all these languages. You have Yoruba, you have English, you have a little bit of French, you have a little bit of Hausa, you have a little bit of Mende. So you have a bunch of languages in Creole. So if I were to say to you in Creole, "What's you wala say?" I know you hear some English in there. You heard the word say. You heard, and all I said is, "What do you want me to say? What's you wala say?" So don't beat yourself up. The more you go to Sierra Leone, you will pick up Creole because it's a language that's predominantly picked up by ear and by association. Yeah. As far as purchasing land in Sierra Leone, I guess my question to you would be, would you be purchasing land in Freetown? Is that what
Yes, Freetown.
Okay, and the reason why I ask is because in the provinces of Sierra Leone, land is not really sold or bought. It's given to you by the chiefs of the town. So depending on your genealogy or your family. So as a Nallo, there's parts in the southern provinces where the Nallos are from, where I have a right, or my daughter has a right to go and say, I'm a Nallo, I want to start a farm, or I want to herd cattle, I want land, and the chief will provide you the land. In Sierra Leone, you can buy land. It's extremely, extremely expensive now because a lot of people are trying to go back to Sierra Leone. But the main word of caution I would give you is to get a really, really good lawyer, because there is a lot of fraud when it comes to sales. So people are selling land that don't really belong to them, or they're selling the same piece of land to 3 and 4 different people. So what you want to do is to make sure that you have a good lawyer who can really help you to maneuver the rights of the property that you're interested in. And there are also some areas that are less expensive that are good to get into now if you're interested. And I'm happy for us to have a chat offline if you're so interested, and I can refer you to some folks who actually just do just that, help folks like us navigate the waters in Sierra Leone. I hope this has helped.
That really helped. Thank you so much, and I will connect you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you and that's the thing, Erica. That's what we want everybody to do, is connect, because we are a powerful resource. And big shout out to Tony Blackman. Last year when she was on the panel for Bison Abroad, she was saying that we have so many resources as Howardites, and African Americans, that we just have to see them as resources. We have actually everything that we need. Saquon, can we go to the next question? I'm not sure who that next person was.
Yes, so I'll save my questions because there's like 3 questions in the chat. And Catherine, if I'm saying it right, their hand is raised. All right, so Catherine, if you could take
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, morning, depending on where you are. I'm just excited to be on this call today because I know some of the panel folks from our band, Showtime Marching Band family, with Maria, Bridget, and then also Rod, who are all, I consider, very good and dear friends of mine. And then even Tony, who was my suite mate in Bethune. So I just have comments. I don't really have a question. I'm just excited to be here. And I just want to say to you all who are the travelers, who are abroad, and who make these courageous and bold decisions to move and be somewhere far away. It is so inspiring for us on the other end who get to watch you and be vicarious through you, but also even to encourage us even more to travel, even if we're not going to move someplace. Like Suna said, you know, we should be traveling, we should be out there. And so I just want to thank you all for those bold decisions to do that. It's very inspiring. You know, I'm sure you probably have helped somebody that you have no idea who didn't want to make that move, but made the move because they saw you out and about and doing your thing. And what's even more exciting is that when us on the American side get to go abroad and then we see our friends there, for example, I saw Rod this past summer at the North Sea Jazz Festival in Rotterdam. And I was so excited to see him. It was so surreal to see him on that other end. But again, it was such an honor to see my Howard Showtime brother perform. You know, I got into the space that he was performing in a little late, and and this is not something that I always do, but I pushed myself all the way up to the front of the stage. And I know white people is looking at me like, what is she doing? So I just want to say thank you. And on the heels of, you know, homecoming, you know, we miss you all, and we look forward to, you know, seeing you again, hopefully sometime soon.
Yay,
Yes.
Catherine.
Yes.
Next question.
Oh, so one of the questions in the chat from Al E. It said, "What countries do you not need vaccines to visit?"
Vaccines for us, for me, I can only speak for myself, but every country that I have been to in Africa requires yellow fever, for example. I'm not even gonna go through all the basics. So all the basics are required, but yellow fever, typhoid, which is not usually required in a lot of Latin American countries, are required in Africa. And folks, don't go to the doctors and have them tell you that yellow fever is no longer required by the World Health Organization. That's a recommendation. If that individual country requires it, you're gonna have issues when you get to that airport. So even if you go to the travel clinic, I always go to the one on K Street in DC. If you go to the travel clinic and they tell you that you don't need yellow fever anymore because the World Health Organization says you don't need it, they're correct, but that is only a recommendation. If the country deems it appropriate for you to have it for their country, you will have issues coming into that country. As far as visas, a lot of countries allow you now to do either visa on arrival or do online visas. But I would strongly recommend that you check the visa criteria even as close to 2 weeks before you travel. And I'll tell you, I was recently in Uganda on my way to Ethiopia, and I almost wasn't allowed to get on the flight because the week that we were in Uganda, the visa criteria changed where US citizens were no longer allowed to do visa on arrival in Ethiopia. So we had to sit at that airport, apply for visas at the airport, and hope and pray for our visa to be approved before we were able to get on a flight. So never make the assumption that just because something was that way last year, it's this way this year. So, and visa criteria change all the time. The UK has changed their visa criteria starting in November. Everyone's going to need to have a visa, whether or not you are a US citizen, which is something that we don't need now. You have to go online and get like an e-visa. So please, those are my 2 words of advice. Always check your visa criteria before you travel. Don't make any assumptions. And while the World Health Organization gives you recommendations, at the end of the day, it's the country that decides what you will need in terms of vaccinations. So follow the guidelines of that country so you're not stressed out when you get to the airport.
We have one. Oh, is another question in the chat?
Yes, please.
Okay. Since Akon stated Black Americans should invest in Africa and they would all be millionaires, how valid do you believe this statement to be?
I think it's in a perfect world, that would be wonderful, but that might be either a bit too idealistic for today, or what are we going to do with all the Chinese? They're overrunning the African continent. They're not going to necessarily leave right away. So they're making a lot of money on the African continent. A lot of European countries are making a lot of money off of the African continent. So I don't think they're going to be as willing and as eager to step aside just because we're Black or we're descendants of Africa to let us come in and take bread from their mouths. So I think it might be a good something to aspire to, but I don't know if, unfortunately, you and I would see that in our lifetimes. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something really quick? I think it's really important to be careful who we listen to. There are self-appointed leaders on the continent of Africa, and Akon is one of those who nobody chose him. Nobody asked him, but he is self-appointed, and he speaks on a lot of issues on which he's not educated. He's not informed, and he does not have the capacity to provide critical analysis for anything he's talking about. So he's enthusiastic and he's passionate and he's there. Is his word trustworthy? No. And this is not to take away from any good that he's done, but the good that he's done has been quite limited when we think about the capacity that he has in terms of making impact. We're still waiting to see his city. We're still waiting to see the results. Even his music projects, but he's loud. The loud people get heard. And that's just the honest truth, the Bison truth.
And that's our poet, hip hop poet laureate, Tony Blackman, worldwide traveler. Okay. Yes, please connect with her. And she was one of our Bison Abroad guests in 2021. So thank you so much for coming back, Tony, and just blessing us with your knowledge, real practical knowledge. Anyone else have a question? Because we want to go back to Bridget too. No, go.
Oh, we have another comment and we have another question and comment, and then Monica raised her hand.
Okay.
I agree with you, Tony, when you wrote that comment, because I think he speaks from a money perspective. But anyways, the question from Raina said, do you have a dual citizenship? What is the process of obtaining citizenship? Have any panelists went through that process?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a dual citizen. Yeah. Yeah, the process it's quite a long one. Yeah, because when I initially moved to the UK, I was given permanent stay, permanent stay to leave. I forget the exact term of it. So I couldn't apply for citizenship. You have to live here for a year first, and then you obtain your permanent citizenship, your permanent residency, that is. And I think you have to be here for 5 years. I think you have to live here for 5 years, I think, before I could apply for citizenship. And then, so I guess it was 10 years before I applied for my citizenship, for my British citizenship. And then, yeah, studied for the test, took the test, passed it. And yeah, that was it. But it's, going back to the test, yeah, it's a lot of information, but the test is short. It's like akin to your driver's test. The information is dense, but the test is very short. Yeah, so yeah, but yeah, that was my process. Yeah.
So Monica, she has her hand up. Big shout out, Margaretta. What's up?
Well, thank you all. This is opportunity from Dr. LaPointe invited me. I am a 3-time alum. So I bleed blue, HU. This has been wonderful. I have been to Africa actually during my undergrad, my senior year. And so this has just come full circle for me. And my question is, in general, what would you all recommend, since many of you on the panel have pretty much lived and worked for, it seems like, decades to being able to get in terms of international experience for like employment experience, if you're interested in working abroad, not necessarily studying abroad, but being able to work abroad? What would you recommend? And any kind of resources. And then also, Suna, I wanted to connect with you at some point. Thank you.
So I actually I've put my email in the chat box. But as far as working abroad, Monica, one of the best ways to start is if you haven't joined the Peace Corps, think about the Peace Corps. And the reason why I say the Peace Corps is that when you join the Peace Corps, it truly is the hardest job you'll ever love. You're going to be exposed to different cultures. You won't get paid per se, but you do get a stipend. But what it does for you is it opens doors for you. It opens doors for you. Another place that you might want to look at, a lot of people don't think about this, but working at embassies. Because a lot of folks assume that you have to be Australian to work at the Australian embassy, or you have to be Irish to work at the Irish embassy. And that's not necessarily the case. There are positions, but when you work at embassies, there are opportunities to travel associated with that. And also think about the State Department, UNICEF, WHO, World Bank, African Development Bank. They're all in the Washington metropolitan area. They do hire, and even if it's maybe not the ideal job of your choice, I can't speak enough about getting your foot into the door of an organization. So, don't look at the position and think, oh, I don't want to do that. Think about aspire. What is your aspiration? Where do you want to get to? And how can you use a position as a stepping stone?
Okay, thank you. And I'm writing all of this stuff that's being said down, the travel clinic, all of that. I have a trip to make to the travel clinic. So we're going to end this amazing discussion with Bridget having the last word. We're coming back to you, Bridget. Hopefully your audio is working. You were talking about, I forgot what the question was. Oh, why is it important for people to go abroad, to travel, to live, things like that?
I think in general, that Americans that are people of color, Black Americans, need to travel abroad so that the world gets to know us. A lot of, perception of our culture comes from television when you talk about abroad. Even going over as an ordained missionary, and when I got off the plane, although I went to Africa, to South Africa, and the people that were there to receive me were people of color from South Africa, they were very shocked to see that I was Black. Very, very, very shocked, to the point that I was like literally embarrassed. When Global Ministry said that we're sending Bridget, Robinson to come, and she's going to be the street child specialist and nurse, that missionaries are white people. So they were very, very shocked, and for a long time they didn't know how to deal with me because they were in such shock. So I think we have to represent, so that people can get a broader understanding of of whether we're musicians or nurses or educators, or regardless of whatever our occupations are, we need to go and get these, go out there, take a trip, keep your passports updated, because I always tell people you never know when the opportunity is going to come. You could be, in a meeting at your workplace, whatever industry you're working in, and someone starts talking about a trip abroad, and you're not prepared because you don't have a passport, and passports and visas are a long process. So I know there's a lot of people that miss opportunities just because they're not thinking that broadly and having themselves prepared for an opportunity. The other part of the question, I think, Maria, was how do you prepare? When I do orientations for groups, and it's a very structured orientation. What I call it is unpack your baggage. We're not going to wait until we get to a foreign country and just unpack and hang up our jackets and put our clothes in the drawers in the hotel or at the accommodation. We need to start unpacking our emotional baggage, before we go and travel. Because we have a history here in the US. And this history, others are aware of it, but from like a social standpoint and how you your dynamics socially in other cultures, you can't take that baggage with you. Even in South Africa, it was post-apartheid. There's still a lot of racism in South Africa. So what does it mean to deal with the white races in the US and the white races in South Africa, are totally different. So I had to unpack, what growing up and being a Black American in the US is, as opposed to going to any other country and being a Black American. Like I even do trainings for orientations for white people that are going to the Africa region. And, transformation, processes are really difficult because they're, it's like, you're not going to go there and rule, you're not just going to cut in front of people in the grocery line, just because you're white, So yeah, I say definitely, a broad perspective of who Black Americans are and how we contribute to the world in general, and also that we need to unpack before we go open and ready to receive, the opportunity.
Wow, and that's a perfect note to end on. It really is. That was, this has been amazing. Just a quick moment of silence to kind of acknowledge what's going on in Gaza, because people are struggling right now, and it's just a lot of madness and craziness that's happening. But we want to thank the Capstone would like to thank all of you, Rod, Tisa, Suna, and Bridget, for taking your time, and for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your love, kind of your struggle. We didn't even get back to what you were saying, Bridget, and I wish that we had more time about the retransitioning back into the American life. But thank you for your courage, for your boldness. I know I had only been to Mexico and Canada, and after Tony, Troy, Debbie, and Carsey, their panel, and Troy was like, go to Kenya, it's Africa light, you can fit in easier, it'll be easier to integrate. So that's where we're going. That's the first place that I'm going on the continent. So these forums are extremely, extremely helpful and productive and beautiful. Let's just take it, unmute yourselves and give yourselves a round of applause, please. Big ups to everybody.
Well, that's it for our event. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to become a member of the Capstone Group or make a donation to our scholarship fund, click on the link below. Take good care and enjoy.